Imagine walking away from your career at the age of 50 with no plan whatsoever. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Who in their right mind would do such a thing? And yet, that's exactly where I found myself the year I turned 50, when I discovered my permission slip. A permission slip that represented the chance to break free from tradition, from duty, from responsibility. In the spring of 2012, I was training for the Vancouver International Marathon and the Ride to Conquer Cancer, when suddenly I had no energy to run even 1 mile, let alone 26.2. It felt like I was dragging hundreds of pounds behind me while I was trying to run through quicksand. Having done both of those events the previous year, I knew that something was very wrong. For the next 6 months, I went through life like the walking dead. It didn't help that I was working 70-hour weeks in a job as an in-house lawyer that I didn't like. After endless medical tests, my doctor concluded that I had some sort of mysterious virus and that there was nothing that she could do for me. I just had to ride it out until I felt better. There was simply no cure. Every day, I felt so exhausted, I could hardly get out of bed. I knew that something had to give. My life was absolutely broken. I felt broken and defeated. Then, something miraculous happened. I woke up one day and realized that my mysterious illness was not an obstacle that was destroying my life. Instead, it was the permission to walk away from a job that was destroying my soul. Working in a high-stress job that I didn't love was the very thing that was making me sick. I had no choice but to quit my job in order to regain my health. The reason I stayed in my career for so long was because of my belief that being a lawyer, a professional in general, was an immigrant's permission slip to be seen, to not be treated as an outsider, to feel like they belonged in Canada. In 1969, my parents and I immigrated to Canada from Hong Kong. I spoke very little English when we arrived, but because my parents spoke good English and were professionals, the school principal allowed me to be put into the regular grade 1 class rather than the New Canadians class. I still remember how relieved my parents were at my not being put in the New Canadians class. Being 6.5 at the time, I didn't fully appreciate why that was so important to my parents. All I knew was that it was somehow bad to be a New Canadian. And that notion was confirmed for me every single day at school. I saw the South Asian and East Asian kids from the New Canadians class being taunted and bullied by the Canadian kids. The Canadian kids threw rocks at the New Canadian kids and told them to get off the playground during recess. All of that led me to conclude that being a New Canadian meant you were somehow a lower class of person than the Canadian kids. One day, a boy in my class called me a dirty chink and made fun of my slanty eyes. Up until that moment, I didn't know that my eyes were any different from anybody else's and worthy of ridicule. I didn't know what a chink was, so when I got home from school, I asked my grandma. She told me to ask my parents when they got home from work. From the look on her face, I thought that I'd said something bad, maybe a swear word or something. When my parents got home, I asked them, and their reply to me was, "You have to study hard, do well in school, so that you can become a professional, so that no one can put you down ever again." They explained that some Canadians look down upon Chinese immigrants. That's why it was important to become a professional and to make a good living, so that I could stand on my own 2 feet and not feel like I was less than anybody else. Those became the words that would chain me to my soul-crushing job. So there I was, at the age of 50, about to throw away everything that I had worked for, everything that my parents had worked for. What was I thinking? I felt like a total and complete failure. My family, like many Asian families, had very high expectations. I'd been taught that failure was never an option. It was embarrassing and shameful to fail. When I entered university, my parents gave me the choice of being a doctor, lawyer, or an accountant. Those were the jobs that were considered the holy grail. My becoming a lawyer meant for my parents that I was successful and that now I could stand on my own 2 feet. I was no longer an outsider. We had arrived. I knew that walking away from my career would crush my parents' dream. When I called my parents to tell them that I'd quit my job, the first thing my mom said to me was, "Can you phone them and tell them you made a mistake and ask for your job back?" I don't think so. Then she followed that up with, "Oh, I'm sure you'll find something in no time. There are lots of good jobs for lawyers." It was really hard explaining to them that maybe I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore and that I just wanted to take some time off to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. That wasn't something they understood. To them, being a lawyer was exactly what I was supposed to be doing with my life. Didn't matter whether I was happy in my job. This was my career, so I had to suck it up and carry on. So for the next few months, my parents phoned me every single day to see whether or not I'd found a new job. And every day, my reply to them was, "I'm not looking for a new job." Although I had crushed my parents' dream, I knew that my mysterious illness was the permission slip I needed to find my calling, to find my place in the world, to do something that I was passionate about. So I gave myself permission to enjoy my jobless life and sit at home in my pajamas eating chips and watching the Food Network. Don't get me wrong, it was super scary not working and living off my savings, but it was something I needed to do to get my life back. Embracing the permission to walk away from a situation that was holding me back allowed me to see the possibilities before me. At 50, I was not too old to change careers. So one thing led to another, and I ended up in coaching school at Coach Training World in Portland. Their philosophy that we are all uniquely brilliant really resonated with me. My biggest aha moments came during my coaching training. I realized that my memories from my early school years of the new Canadian kids being taunted and bullied and the boys' pejorative comments were what led me to make the decisions I had made in my life. I had spent my life trying to prove that I'm not a lower class of person just because I'm Chinese. Thinking back to when I was growing up, I didn't want to be Chinese. I wanted to be blonde and blue-eyed so that I could fit in with the kids at school. I was embarrassed whenever my grandparents spoke Cantonese in public. I just didn't want to be an outsider. I wanted to belong. My coaching training allowed me to let go of the armor that I had built to protect my 6.5-year-old self. I realized that I did not need to hang on to my career as a professional in order to be accepted into Canadian society. Constructs and beliefs built up over a lifetime are really hard to let go of, especially when we think that those constructs and beliefs are meant to protect us. Learning that what I thought was protecting me was actually harming me was a huge eye-opener. Without a permission slip, I would never have been able to figure that out. So, once I figured that out, I knew that there was no going back to working in a job that would suck the life out of me. So I asked myself what I would regret not doing in my lifetime. I'd always wanted to write a book, so I wrote and published my first book. I also decided that I needed the freedom to pick and choose the work that I would do. So that's when I decided to become a coach and an entrepreneur. I only accepted work that I was passionate about. 3 years after my mysterious illness, I was indeed able to find my calling. The opportunity to teach in the Bachelor of Law Enforcement Studies program at the Justice Institute of BC dropped into my lap. The moment I stepped into the classroom, I knew that I had found my place in the world and my purpose. In teaching my students about the law, I encourage them to not simply accept the law as it is, but to think about how they can go about changing it if they think it's wrong or unjust. My role as an educator is to give my students the tools to challenge the status quo, find their own voice, and see their own brilliance. Having a permission slip to walk away from a situation that was holding me back allowed me to take those first steps. Without it, I would still be in my spirit-crushing job, counting the years to retirement. And that is no way to live. Being able to walk away from my career as a lawyer turned out to be much more than simply permission to make a career change. It turned out to be the permission slip to let go of my negative childhood experiences, to be proud of my Chinese heritage, to know that I am not an outsider, to know that I belong in Canada. Now, more than ever, each of us has to look for those instances that present themselves as permission slips that will allow us to live the lives that we were meant to live. Often, it's the adversities, the mistakes, or the failures that turn out to be the opportunities to change our lives for the better. Getting out of your comfort zone is hard and scary. It's much easier to simply continue on with the status quo, no matter how unhappy you are. Problem is, that's the very thing that's holding you back. So, when your permission slip presents itself, reach out and grab it and hold on tight with all your might. That is your ticket to pursuing your passion, finding your calling, living the life of your dreams.